Hello and welcome to the Art of Teaching the Whole Child in a Pandemic, Cultivating Trauma-Sensitive Practices for Resilience. This is the introduction to Module 2, which will cover intentional greetings and wise feedback. So welcome to everyone who's listening in, whether you're here to target your own professional SEL goals, improve student disengagement concerns that you're encountering, your concerns about students' trauma stacking right now during the umbrella of COVID that overrides all of these concerns. So just as a review, we've discussed the habit loop and how teaching pits can kind of be the cue into these routines that we're trying to develop, such as tiny self-care habits, as well as right now where we're going to pivot into talking about new strategies that we can use to be able to build resilience in our classrooms. And so we've already gone through the month of November, and here we are coming into December to build a more positive culture in our classrooms with intentional greetings and wise feedback. So what this might look like is that you're right here in this course. And so we're going to be building 4 habits that stick. So this is your first opportunity to choose one of those habits that you want to stick with. So each month we're going to tackle doing what you're doing right now, watching a video and following along with a journal in week 1. And then you'll choose which strategy you want to use, whether it's the predictability strategy or the connection strategy. And then you'll learn more about that in week 2 to more further define what you want that to look like. And then in weeks 3 and 4, you'll be taking a pulse on yourself and keeping in touch with the class to continue to refine how you're using that strategy for the month. So right now you are here, you're in week 1. So this is just introduction to these strategies and these thoughts about greetings and feedback, and then you'll be able to make your decision by the end of the week about where you want to go next week and what you want to dig into. So just as a recap also of our disconnection and unpredictability that we're facing in the COVID-19 pandemic has led to increased levels of anxiety, depression, burnout, as well as decreased focus, engagement, and wellness among staff and students. And so we want to focus on building disconnection because um, combating the disconnection actually, because relationship building is harder right now. It's impacting our trust and our rapport with students. And then on the flip side of that, there's increased levels of unpredictability as well, where it's also making that harder to establish and establish that predictability that it's just ingrained in the school day typically. And so that's impacting our sense of stability in our environment for ourselves and our students. And so we're going to combat that by trying to build more peaks in the day for predictability, which are the times that we know what activities to expect. We know how long they take. Students know how and how often they participate. And the peaks of connection, where we're having mostly positive interactions with students. They're being cooperative in participating. There's a common language that we're using for talking about the expectations, and we're calmly handling conflict in the classroom. Now, we wouldn't have peaks without pits, of course. So let's acknowledge, what do pits look like when we're talking about connection? It looks like times where there's mostly negative interactions, where students are being uncooperative. There's kind of an unclear language, and there's some kind of back and forth between students and staff. And then there's times where we're harshly handling conflict, or maybe just avoiding it altogether. And then on the other side of having those pits and predictability, there are the times that we don't really know what to expect and how long activities are going to take, and how we don't know how students will be participating in this activity. And so students start to tune out or lose focus. And so having pits and peaks is totally normal and totally part of teaching, no matter where you're at. So we want to name these and think about ways that we can build more resilience in those pits, which good news is we have research-based strategies that can support us in person, hybrid, or remote learning. There's research supporting this resilience fact that small intentional greetings can promote predictable engagement from students. And fact that research shows us that wise approaches to feedback can build students' trust and resilience in the face of difficult times. So in this Module 2 introduction, you'll learn about how to think about feedback and greetings, our first pair of routines that you can choose from. Then you'll notice the pits and peaks of feedback and greetings so that you can select one routine, whether it's feedback or greetings, to make that more habitual. You're going to need about 20 minutes, some clear headspace, and your printed or digital journal, which looks a little bit like this, so that you can do steps 1 through 3. So you're already on the right track of completing this video about greetings and feedback pits. Be sure to take notes along the way in your journal as we talk about what this is, and being preparing to choose whether you want to tackle feedback or greetings. That's the ultimate goal for this week. Simple goal. So feedback. Why are we talking about feedback? Well, a good thing to think about here is that of all the things we don't control is the fact that we actually do control the way we deliver feedback. We still control that. There's a lot of things outside of our control, but this we still have some control over. When I say feedback, I'm talking about both process and performance, because I think you're probably thinking about performance feedback, right? So this is where we provide input on academic performance and students in the ideal world, accept and use that feedback, right? That's a part of feedback, but there's also the process feedback, which is those interactions that we have with students that promotes their engagement and cooperation, such as those check-ins during independent work, during remote learning, check-ins on during group work, like supervising the groups and how we're setting those up and supporting their cooperation. And just in general, the redirections that we provide during in-person learning and even during some video calls. So we're going to have on this we're going to have some peaks, right? So we're going to have those what I would call positive interaction balances. So what this looks like is if you think about the relationship that you have and during the engagement and the cooperation during the process feedback, what does that look like? What is your process feedback? Is it more positive? Is it more negative? Are you depositing more into the piggy bank of those relationships, or are you taking more out? Because research shows across a number of areas in education, business world, even marriages. There's a researcher, Dr. John Gottman, who spent some time with married couples and was able to predict with 94% accuracy based on this, based on the interaction balance, who would be married and who would not be married several years later. So if someone was able to see what does your process feedback look like while students are engaged and cooperating and completing the work, what type of balance would they see? And the peak is that you're going to have sometimes some periods of the day, some activities, some students where it's easier to find this positive balance. And there's going to be times where it's not so easy, and that's totally normal. And then there's also the idea of how we deliver feedback to students. There'll be a video that I'll be sharing with you next week from Miss Rita Pearson, who talks about how she gave a student some feedback, and she had 20 points on this exam, and she gave him a +2 instead of a -18 because he missed 18 of them. But the way she delivered the feedback of a student that missed the vast majority of the questions was empowering to him and encouraged him to keep his head up, even though he got only 2 out of 20 correct. And then on the educator side, what does this look like for us on the pits? So there are going to be times, like I mentioned, we're going to have negative interaction balance, where we're just constantly redirecting. We're constantly asking, are you supposed to be doing that? If I have to tell you one more time, like we're just getting exhausted with the negative interactions. And then we're going to have times where we are delivering a lot of critical feedback or constructive feedback. And we have to deliver that in a way that we are not proud of, or we want to soften it, but it's just really hard because there's a lot. There's the -18 instead of the +2. So then on the student side, what do they experience? What does this look like? Process peak. So when students are getting that positive interaction, the positive feedback in their process, they are able to persist in their difficulties. When they're able to incorporate their feedback that we give them, the performance peak is that they're able to take criticism well. But as you're probably experiencing right now, we're seeing a little bit more of those feedback pits than we have in the past. So what this might look like is the fight, flight, or freeze idea that we see in the trauma research, which is the idea of a student putting up a fight, so continuing to disrupt the classroom even when you're redirecting them, or engaging in a power struggle, like kind of a debate about, but you are doing this, or but you, like it's all about the back and forth, or kind of fighting that feedback that we're giving. or they might flee from it. So a good example of this is taking it personally. So kind of over like blowing it up a bit to kind of flee from that. Just like I was just trying to tell you to how to do this one problem, but the student has like taken it, way too far and kind of blown it up to say, I'm just so bad at math in general. Like, well, I was just giving you a little bit of constructive feedback here. Or maybe for some of our little ones, actually running from us, whether on the playground or actually out of the classroom. And then sometimes we have what we call freezing. So this is when a student just shuts down, does not accept your input into the assignment. Maybe they're just put their head down, or just as you can tell, sometimes they're just kind of tuning you out, waiting for you to keep to move it along and not take in that feedback. So in summary, we want to build more feedback peaks in our days where we have those more positive interactions and we are comfortable with constructive feedback, the students are as well, and come up with ways to avoid those pits where we have more negative feedback and we're uncomfortable with the constructive feedback that we give. So that's feedback in a nutshell. We're going to move forward to talk about greetings a bit. So follow along in your notes, which look like little bit like this. So greetings. I'm sure you're thinking, what does a greeting pit look like? Are we really going to be talking about like waving to students on a video call and greeting them at the door? Like that's such a simple thing to be talking about. But fact is that research shows when we are able to reach these peaks where we name each student, like during a given routine, just saying the student's name, either when they enter the activity, when they enter the room, even this even applies to video calls, during the activity, if there is this idea that during a certain routine, every time they're going to be named, whether upon entry or during the activity, for every single student, that creates student greeting peaks, because the students recognize in these routines or blocks, I expect to be seen or heard. And I know it seems so simple and so hokey to you, but it's really important right now when we have a lot of these negative interactions with students, more than we are accustomed to in the past, because just like one incident or conflict can spiral into a student disengaging from school, one positive experience can have compounded benefits. It starts with one good day at school, one lesson, one positive interaction, one teacher that has their back. So if we build a habit of greeting, then we're going to habitually be finding simple and easy ways to build these little positive experiences into the day. So the pits on our side look a little bit like having our initiations of certain routines and certain activities just kind of being unintentional. We just kind of stumble into them. The students maybe just stumble into the classroom or something like that. And then we kind of sometimes fall into these ruts of how we select students, where we're not really varying that too much, and we're ending up calling on the same students all the time, even unintentionally, that for some reason we just have a few students that are participating and not every student. So not every student is having their name called or actively engaging in the classroom. And what this leads to and what that looks like for the students is some of that more of the fight, flight, or freeze. So they might fight by using attention seeking, or what I would call connection seeking, which we'll learn a little bit more about, behaviors to be seen. So, I'm preaching to the choir here. I think every teacher has certain attention seeking behavior that they can name that happen in their classroom. And that can often happen because there's not that predictable greeting type of approach. And then there's the flight sometimes where students just skip periods or skip calls because they're like, I know I'm not even going to be seen. I can just slip into, like, they don't even notice that I'm there really. So why even show up to that call, that video call, or show up to that class? Or freezing, trying to lay low and not be seen in that classroom. So that happens from time to time. So greetings in a nutshell, we have peaks where most students are named and or they participate, and sometimes we have our pits where only a few students are named, only a few participate. So your next task, step 2, is to think about feedback or greetings a little bit more by diving into a pit reflection. So answer one reflection question that you want to grow in, whether it's the feedback balance, your critical feedback, greeting rates. Check out step 2 in your journal and take a look at these questions and think about which one would you want to grow in. If you answered it now, and if you answered it in a week or two, which one would you want to say, I have a better answer for this that I know is based on research and is a habit that I can cultivate in my classroom? So I'll give you a moment to pause the video, answer that question, and come back. All right. So hopefully you've answered that question, and we can move forward into the final step, which is very simple this week. Super simple. Probably the simplest task that we'll have each week, which is basically just selecting. How do you feel now? Which one do you want to tackle? So you have the feedback or greeting pit. So which one are you going to tackle? Is it going to be greetings or feedback for this month? So on step 3, you're just going to choose which one you want to tackle. And here's a little bit of a goal statement that is basically what you're acknowledging, what you're going to take on this month, and where you want to go from here. So now, after you've done that, you'll have completed all 3 steps for this week. And in summary, we're noticing those pits, we're developing a target routine so that we can build more connection and predictability. So your next step will be to upload your key takeaway from this video, as well as your selected strategy, feedback, or greetings. There is an upgrade ahead. You probably noticed that we didn't do like the typical pit and peak and journal like for on a page for a week because we're going to be moving into an approach called Daily Pulse, which is something that I'm really excited to share with you to talk about in a video that will be posted along with this. So keep an eye out for that video to help us all move forward with continuing to notice those pits and peaks, to be grateful for those peaks in the spirit of Thanksgiving right now, and to help us all improve the ways that we can navigate those pits. As always, don't hesitate to reach out to me with any questions or concerns you have about navigating this course content. Thank you so much for tuning in.